Morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's MPC Markets Morning Call, 5th of August 2025. Stocks bounced back overnight after Friday's big fall as investors rushed to buy the dip. We basically had investors rushing back in. I think it's a hell of a lot to do with the fact that Trump was nowhere near as active as what people thought. I think there was a lot of risk taken off the table on Friday night. Just people a little bit fearful about what Trump might do. And on the Trump scale, he did very little. I mean, just moving a couple of nuclear subs, sacking a head of a department. That's fairly. It's a quiet weekend for President Trump. And what buoyed investors in the US particularly is they, growing expectations of a rate cut because of that poor employment number. It's a pretty standard reaction overall for the US equity market. They sort of go and price well ahead the benefits of a rate cut and probably overlook why the rate cut's coming, which is slowing economic activity. But it is a pretty normal reaction for the US to do this, and I'm not remotely surprised about it. On the Bulls versus Bears podcast I do with Jonathan Takadena on Friday, sort of said, the damage will be done on the Friday night. We'll probably grind higher over the course of the week. Despite the fact I'm prepping clients for, to be being on the sell side and going to a high level of cash over the course of the next couple of weeks. What happens in between now and then is probably, is up for argument. And the tone is still very much positive because the Mag 7 earnings overall were positive, and that is a highly concentrated part of the market. So if they go up, the market goes up basically. So let's have a look here. NVIDIA rallied, Google, Meta, semis all rallied. Palantir, which I'll get to in just a minute, overall. But look, it's all green except for Amazon. I think Amazon's being a little bit harshly dealt with, but I think Microsoft's made it look, a little bit poor by eating its lunch a little bit. So, and it's definitely sort of, it's playing catch up. So. We didn't have a huge amount of in the way of earnings overnight. We had Palantir, which is the most expensive company in the world, and it got more expensive overnight. So rallied about 7 or 8%. But it's going to do a little bit of a comparison here. So this is their income statement, Q4 2024 and Q2 2025. So we're talking 3 quarters difference here. And revenue really is, revenue's up obviously a good 200 million, 48% year on year, and then gross profit up nearly 200 million again. But notice the cost of revenue moved by less than 20 million. Operating expenses as well dropped by 100 million. So their operating profit went from 11 million to 269 million with a 27% margin. And then, obviously, the net profit now around about that 329 million. They've got a $10 billion contract over the next 10 years with the Department of Defense in the US, which really solidifies their earnings. It's still one interesting quote I heard on Bloomberg this morning. It is the closest company in terms of valuation is what Palantir is double as expensive than next nearest competitor. So it may struggle to justify it, but look, I mean, if you had a company growing like that in just 3 quarters, 99% of companies wouldn't have that growth ever. It is quite incredible. It'll be interesting to see if they can maintain it. We did have HIMSS as well overnight, which was the telehealth provider, basically, that operates in the States. It was probably a bit of an example of probably an earlier stage business than this, and it really did it disappointed, and there's some legal, proceedings going on with them and Novo Nordisk, or maybe Novo Nordisk, or doing generic drugs or knockoff weight loss drugs, etc. But still staggering 255% 1 year stock return, revenue jumping by 70%. Dramatic swing to profitability, net income of 126 million, 300% jump. And 83.5% Rule of 40 score. Now, in Palantir has a 94% Rule of 40 score, and I can basically, hear, people have asked me, well, not specifically, but more about how you value high growth companies. And being from an ASX background and Australian background, we don't see these sorts of hyper growth companies. So this Rule of 40, it's something that Xero does here in Australia. But the Rule of 40, it's too hard to explain. Wrong podcast for me to explain it. But it is a really good, it's not a magic number. It's more of a rule of thumb. But I've written an article or an education piece on the website that explains the Rule of 40 and gives a couple of examples with GitLab, Palantir, and Salesforce, sort of early stage, mid stage, and then and late stage growth companies. Really well worth looking out for, because it is incredibly difficult. Because obviously, Global Alpha podcast yesterday had Richard Nader on, and we've had Palantir since last November. And when he brought it to me as sort of head of the investment committee, I looked at it and just at a ridiculous, eye-watering valuation. And I've gone, okay. And you look, it was right. And I started to dig into why I didn't necessarily write it off, but I went and I was curious as to, as I'd never seen from an Australian market perspective anything that has grown anywhere near that fast. So I started to really dig into it, and it's been a really valuable experience going and seeing that, because that little formula, it can really help you probably see a little bit more of the forest for the trees as long as they maintain it, and then you can. And it's because it's a different category. Stocks aren't like for like. And it's a good way to really see price in some future growth, and using a little bit of maths and a little bit of metrics, so it doesn't feel like you're flying by the seat of your pants. So AMD tonight, Pfizer tonight, CAT tonight. Everything else I don't think you'll be really paying too much attention to. Berkshire Hathaway disappointed yesterday, and we went through the Schiller PE. He'll be sitting in cash for quite some time. Everyone laughed at him in 2001, and he sat on his hands and made an absolute fortune. I think he did the same in 2007. No one is going to budge Warren Buffett on those key valuations. That's where he makes his money in decades, not in years. So it was off about 3% overnight. But AMD will be the big focus tomorrow night. A bit of manufacturing data, but there's not enough data out there at the moment really or earnings really to be derailing this move currently. So I think the SPY was up nearly 1%. We'll probably see things continue to drift higher. Iron ore was up a couple. Was up, I believe. Where are we here? 1.5%. Gold was up, silver was up, platinum was up slightly, copper at least stabilised, uranium was up. So look, I would say across the board, with the US dollar drifting off a little bit, which it will with lower rates expected, commodities higher, banking sector higher, general market higher, it should be pretty good for the ASX. And we basically finished fairly flat yesterday. It was I didn't expect the market in the Aussie to come off yesterday. I was actually a little bit proud of our little index holding in there so well. And obviously US futures rallied through the course of the day, but we tend to be a touch more on the negative or the Dow side. We're not as hyper bullish. So a fairly quick one in relation to the previous couple of weeks with the morning pod. there's no economic numbers of any consequence today. So nothing really on the calendar. And I mean, AMD's big, but it's not enormous. It's not going to derail this rally. And obviously, there's the standard disclaimer of, Trump, the Trump disclaimer, always expect the unexpected. And because he could come out and say anything at any time, but it does look relatively positive, I would say, for at least the first week or two, potentially of August. We may be even in a situation where I think everyone's going to be so laser focused on the payrolls numbers now. We might wait for that next number, but what we are going to see is some of those second tier jobs numbers like JOLTS, the job openings, and the weekly jobless claims on the Thursday night, probably being paid a fair bit more attention to. They're normally very second tier numbers, but when everyone's nervous about payrolls, they start to really laser focus on those. So they'll be things to look out for. But yeah, we'll hopefully we get a little bit of buoyancy over the next couple of weeks, and we sort of set up nicely to to take some profits and see how we go in September. And so have a great day, everyone. Good luck in the markets, and we'll speak again tomorrow. General advice warning. The content presented in this presentation is intended for informational purposes only and provides general advice only. It does not take into account your personal objectives, financial situation, or specific needs. This information should not be the sole resource when making investment decisions. We strongly recommend you seek the advice of a financial professional.